So thank you so much for having me again. I'm a Canadian genealogist, so I am looking at this from sort of a Canadian vantage point, but I have been to Ireland several times to research. I have not been able to research in Northern Ireland yet, however. I have stood outside the Public Records Office of Northern Ireland, but my family were having none of it on that particular vacation. So this is mostly focusing on researching in the Republic of Ireland, but obviously a lot of the information will be the same. If you were here today, but you do not have Irish ancestry, I think you will still find some helpful information on creating a research plan to go to a different country, as again, overall, the steps are going to be quite similar. So what is a research plan again? This is the map of what you intend to do to solve a research problem. It doesn't have to be complicated or elaborate. This is just for you. So do whatever you need and leave out whatever does not serve you. And it can be in any format. And I'll show you a few different options. But it really depends how you like to organize things. Why do you need a research plan before you go to Ireland? Well, I like to wing it on my vacations. I like a few dinner reservations, but otherwise, I just like to eat where it looks good. I like that happy accident of randomly finding a festival or a restaurant I wasn't anticipating, rather than scheduling things down to the minute. But on a research trip, I have to crack down on this aspect of my nature because I usually only have a few days where the family's going to accept that I'm going to the library or the archive. So if I waste time, I am wasting precious vacation dollars. Now, I have been working in the National Library in Ireland and overheard other tourists come in to speak to the resident genealogist, only to be sent across town to the General Registry office because they were in the wrong building for what they were looking for. And I've also seen other North Americans in the National Library in Dublin working at a computer station on the Find My Past database. It is not good value on the dollar to fly all the way to Dublin to work on a database you could have subscribed to from home. So do all that planning, sitting in your house coat on a wintry night at home in Canada or whatever country you might be in. I recognize here we probably have attendees from around the world. So when I say Canada, just in your mind, substitute the name of your country or the name of the country where your Irish ancestor emigrated to. So less wasted time means more time to research in Ireland and more time in the pub. I'm not perfect at this, but I do kind of kick myself whenever I fail on this point and end up doing work in Ireland that I should have done from home. So you might be saying, but Colleen, I have no plans to go to Ireland soon. Do I really need to work on an Irish research plan now when my trip might be months or years away? Well, you want to stay ready so you don't have to get ready. What if every time you came across an interesting database or information on a repository or an idea for a research strategy that might work for you, you went and added it to your plan? Why wait until the pressure is on and the tickets are booked to try to remember all those great resources you learned about 5 years ago? So just add them to your plan when you find out about them. And then the basis of your research plan is already set out long before you even are in the works to go. So what to put in your plan? You want to start with that research goal or research question. So you're going to specify what ancestor you're looking for in Ireland, their approximate age, and what you want to find out about them. Next, you're going to outline whatever research you've already done on this ancestor. You could make this elaborate with screenshots and citations, or you could just write a summary paragraph, knowing that the exact details are saved in your genealogy software. It's up to you. Generally, though, I'll say the more effort you put into the process, the more likely of successful results coming out. So I do like to put in citations, images of documents that I've already found, maps, and so on. So you should, I really do advise, put in a timeline for the ancestor of where you found them at different records and when. Then you're going to notice any gaps that require more research. You want to analyze everything you've got so far. Was the quality of your sources good? Did you miss any major record sets? Did you use original records wherever possible? Or are there things you kind of need to go back over before you can even start working on Irish research? You can put in a hypothesis, like from the research I've conducted so far, I hypothesize that my ancestor was from a particular Irish townland where I have found a high concentration of his surname. And now I'm going to test that hypothesis by researching that townland carefully in Ireland. I suggest that you make a detailed plan of any records in Canada or the country your ancestor moved to that you realize you haven't yet consulted that could give evidence on your research question. Then it's helpful to sort out those land divisions for the area in Ireland that you're going to be researching and add in images of modern and historical maps to your plan. And we'll see more about this later. You're going to list any digitized Irish records that you haven't searched, or maybe you have searched in a certain database, but you need to check it again in case the website has been updated, in case there's new content, something that you are planning to review before you leave your country. Then you make a list of everything you want to consult in Ireland. And don't just say you want to see probate records. Write down the specific record that you want to search for. What is the call item in the archives? What is the exact title of the document? Put that all in your plan. And the logistics. Outline exactly what building you will be visiting. Record its address, its opening hours. Review their website carefully to see if you need an appointment, or if you need to apply for a reader's ticket before you can use their records. And we'll say more about logistics as well later on. Here's the excerpt of a plan that I made for a client several years ago, shared with permission. The specifics aren't relevant here, but I want to point out the general level of detail that you want to include. I had a separate section in the plan for what the client should do in Dublin and what she should do in County Cork, since both locations were in her itinerary. And I got very specific, putting in the address of the archives, its opening hours, the call numbers of the documents she should order, and suggestions on how to order the documents. Ideally, you don't want to be figuring this out from your hotel room or once you're sitting in the archive. You'll notice this plan was just done in Word, but the format is up to you. So while I do usually use word processing software, a lot of people like to use Excel or some other spreadsheet. Some people use Evernote. This link and others are in your handout, so no need to rush to write any of these things down. You can also just Google genealogy research plans and see what forms other people have made that you can use or adapt to your own purposes. And people are beginning to use AI to help organize their research plans, and I'll show you a little bit about that later. So going back to this slide of things to put in your plan, for today's presentation, I'm going to assume you've already figured out all of this preliminary stuff. You've reviewed all of your previous work, you've got maybe a hypothesis. So we're going to start at the point of talking about what research you actually want to add to the plan part of the plan. So it is very difficult and not generally recommended to try to research in Ireland until you have a specific Irish location to research. So if your research is stuck at the point of knowing that they came from Ireland, but you don't know where, the work you really need to do is in records in the country your immigrant ancestor came to. So in my case, Canadian records. So if you are lucky enough to know a specific location in Ireland, you might not need to zone in so much on this Canadian research. But if you don't know when your ancestor immigrated, or you don't have a county of origin, or you have a county but not a townland, you still want to spend more time on that research in the country that they went to see if you can turn out any more details before you get to Ireland. So these are the sorts of documents that you want to add to your plan for whatever country your immigrant ancestor went to. Did you find their obituary? If not, you can still sometimes find out information from their spouse's obituary. If you found any suspected siblings or cousins that were living near them or who they associated with in the New World, find their obituaries and find obituaries for all of those people's children. You never know which random cousin's child might have mentioned where their parent came from in Ireland. Tombstone photos, often for the immigrant generation, they will say came from this specific location. Find every census for your ancestor's lifespan in the New World. So in Canadian censuses, we'll have different ones that request birthdays or ages. And of course, the Irish were generally as a lot, I will say not particularly concerned with giving consistent information year over year in the census. So you want to get all of the censuses to compare what information they've given. And some will say year of immigration, and often you will find very different years of immigration reported on each census. So again, find all of them so that you have every little bit of information you can and squeeze that out of all these North American or Australian or whatever documents. Civil registrations. Those are those births, marriages, and deaths for the immigrant, their spouse, and all the children. I have a lot of Canadian civil registrations where they will ask the children, where were your parents born? Often they will just say Ireland, but on the occasional one, you will get a specific place of origin. Church records. These can be helpful if you don't know when your ancestor arrived in the New World. Well, once they start baptizing children, in those church records, you have at least a range of they arrived sometime before that. Or if you have Presbyterians, sometimes they may have got a transfer certificate from their old kirk, and they might have presented that to their new kirk. So check the session minutes of your local Presbyterian churches that the ancestor came to and see if anything might be recorded about where they came from. Ships lists, we really struggle with these in Canada because they start quite late, but in the US much earlier. Land records, if you don't know when they came, but you know when they bought land, you know at least they came sometime before that. Wills, occasionally will mention somebody back home in Ireland, so it's always worth checking, even though you feel like that shouldn't be necessary for researching backwards in Ireland. I still recommend if you don't have a specific location, check just in case. So now we're going to discuss Irish location and mapping. So this is information I found when I was researching Francis Ashe, my 3 times great grandfather. I knew from his tombstone that he came from County Kilkenny. And I knew that he came around the time that he should have still been in Ireland when the Griffiths valuations were done. Those are tax lists that we use now as census substitutes in Ireland because there's unfortunately not that many early Irish censuses that survive. So I narrowed down some possible origins for Francis in County Kilkenny. And one of them was Farron Temple townland in the civil parish of the Rower. And one of them was in Kilcross townland in Innisteag. And so I hypothesized that perhaps one of these Francises was my ancestor. So the map that I've shown here, I took from the website askaboutireland.ie. That is coincidentally the same place where you get the Griffiths valuations online for free. And I was able to take screenshots of the exact plots of land that these 2 Francises were on and add those to my research plan just so I could get a sense of where these people were living. Now, these 2 plots of land are actually only about a 13-minute drive from one another today. So next I wanted to learn about the land or the administrative divisions for these 2 locations. And to do that, I went to what we call a townland index. And I used the one on the S. Wilson website I've put up here, but I've put links for this and other townland indexes into your handout. So I used these indexes to figure out what other land or administrative divisions are relevant to my locations. I want to know what barony, what poor law union, what diocese, etc. Kilcross and Farron Temple are in. Even though they are quite close to one another, the divisions are not exactly the same. And why do I need this information? Because the documents in Ireland that I want to find might have used these words in the titles. So I use all these land divisions as keywords when I search the archive catalogs. You'll note I've also written down the landlord for both pieces of land. Conveniently, it's the same man in this time frame, which is about 1849 or 1850. It's William Teague. And so that is helpful. And I got that again from the Griffiths valuations. So armed with your maps and armed with my land divisions, then you want to see what Irish records are digitized that can be accessed from home that you haven't consulted or you did consult, but you want to look at them again before your trip in case there's any updates. Luckily, most Irish research sites are free, but there are subscription sites. And I've noticed a lot of times, clients won't have joined these subscription sites because of the fee. But I like to point out, many of these sites have short-term memberships, like a day, a week, or a month. And so you can always subscribe for a short period of time and then unsubscribe. A $30 or $50 subscription is a lot less than the thousands of dollars you're about to pay for your trip. So before you go and find yourself using one of these sites in the research room in Dublin at the National Library, instead, take out a short subscription before you go so that you know you've exhausted all of the research that you can from that site. And of course, if you belong to a local genealogy society or nearby a genealogy library, you can usually access at least some of the sites for free through them. Before you subscribe to anything, of course, check their list of records. If it's a newspaper site, for example, make sure there's papers available for the time and place where your ancestors were. Otherwise, of course, there's no point in subscribing. Now, these websites are all in your handout, so I'm just going to mention them briefly. Our civil registrations, those births, marriages, and deaths, are in many cases free at irishgenealogy.ie. But if one hasn't been digitized, you can order them for a fee from the General Registry offices, either in the Republic or in Northern Ireland. Census is online for free. Of course, we only have 1901 and 1911 that are extant, but there are some fragments available prior to that. Early Catholic records are online for free, but other denominations are less likely to be found online unless you are quite lucky. Roots Ireland is a subscription site. They don't have any original records on there, just transcriptions, but do take out a temporary membership if they have records for your time and place, because their index might point you to the original records that you could try to view in Ireland. Griffith's valuation we already talked about. Tythe allotments are tax lists that predate Griffiths, online for free. And the will, not a lot of wills have survived, unfortunately, but some are on the National Archives website. And we do have the will calendars, which are basically indexes of the wills with a bit more information, available at both the National Archives website and the PRONI website for Northern Ireland. Here's some more suggestions of websites that you might want to check out from home. Those valuation books, these are tax records dating prior to Griffiths. Then we've got, various records that Find My Past. They're a subscription site, but they do tend to be the best one, in my opinion, for Irish records. Various newspaper sites, they are all subscription based. Those landed estate records, those are landlord records. Those can be helpful. Military records, etc. Directories might be helpful if you have ancestors who were tradesmen. Deeds are getting to be easier to use. They are, a lot of them, digitized on Family Search, and they are getting simpler to use. I'll show that in a moment. We've got various records at the Virtual Record Treasury and the Ireland Genealogy Projects. Those are both ones that scan different records, tombstones, bits of census, and so on. So what you find is really varying, and you want to check back all the time because you never know what has been added. And the National Folklore Collection, which I will show you next. So the National Folklore Collection is based on the school children's assignments that were given in Ireland in the 1930s, where the students were asked to go interview elderly people in the neighborhood. So if you search and find that a student has done an assignment on the area of your interest, I think it's useful to read through the whole thing, because the search is a little bit buggy on this website. So I did search through Innistig, which was one of my parishes of interest. And I did find on the right a write-up about some Ash family who immigrated to the US. And I noticed that one of the informants for one of the responses was a T. Ash. And so, of course, I was interested to go and read that and see what he had to say in case he was a relative. Because it is folklore, some of it is, stories about fairies, but some stories are about the Great Famine or different people in the community. So it's worth checking, and it's a bit of a mixed bag what you might find. Don't forget to check online for academic journals. You can check for these by Googling or on websites like JSTOR. This article specifically mentioned immigrants to Newfoundland, Canada from Innistig. And I knew that the Ash family had been from the Innistig area, and ashes were indeed mentioned in this paper. So I was quite excited. So you might search JSTOR for locations. Sometimes you'll get, cemetery transcriptions that were done and published in an old journal years ago. You might want to check location in the New World, like this in Newfoundland. You might want to search by surname. You might want to search by topics, like Protestants in Kilkenny, just to see what comes up. Internet Archive is also a good site to check and potentially add items to your research plan. Here I've searched for Kilcross in Innistig, and I found a variety of books and old journals and some newspapers. So I might want to sift through this and see if anything should be added to my plan. And if I'm going to. So again, I'm not looking through all these items right now. I'm just adding them to my plan so that I'm going to go through them systematically and carefully in the future. Otherwise, if I just start going through it right now, I'm going to get distracted. I'm not going to cover everything, and I'm going to just go down a rabbit hole. Now, a word about the large websites, such as the ones that I've listed here, and how you are going to search on them. When you go to a website like Ancestry, don't just go to the front page and use that main search place and type in your ancestor's name, sift through a couple pages of results and say, okay, I've looked through everything, because you haven't. Instead, you want to search by the card catalog, which I've shown you at the top. So you can go to Ancestry, click on search, choose card catalog. And then in the title, type in the word Ireland. And then it's going to bring up all the databases that have the word Ireland in them. And the way Ancestry catalogs their items, they put the word Ireland in each collection that is an Irish collection. So this is a way to pull them all up. I initially prepared this website several years ago, and at the time there was 189 Irish collections at Ancestry. Then you go through that card catalog and say, okay, Irish immigration lists, 1833 to 1839, Ireland census fragments, 1821 to 1851. And then you see, do I think that this is the right year? And is this potentially interesting for my research question? If yes, add it to your research plan. Again, you're not going through these items right now, you're just adding them to your research plan. Now, Find My Past has a similar way you can search. Again, you'll search all record sets and then filter by location and put in Ireland. And here there was at the time 259 record sets. Add anything interesting to your plan. And then when you actually follow your plan and you go to these sites, you're going to search each one of these record sets that you put into your plan separately. You're going to record the results in your research log, even if you found nothing. When you do search on Family Search, make sure to make use of their new AI technology. And the link here, they've got a very recent blog post from just a few weeks ago that's describing how the search has even changed quite recently for AI. So you might want to check that out. Basically, the AI is helping to read the old handwriting, and it's able to identify your ancestors' names embedded in some of the old documents. So I have found this quite helpful in researching Irish deeds, particularly if your ancestor wasn't even a primary person in the deed, they might have just been a witness. So they would never have been indexed or anything in association with that deed. But Family Search might find their name, and you might be able to determine it as them by the location. So definitely check that out, and it's being added to new databases all the time, the ability to use this Family Search AI to do the full text search. Now, when you're doing your plan, consider that some of the Irish records are not digitized, but can still be accessed from afar. Some of the ones that I have used myself and ordered to Canada are civil registrations, if they were not digitized already, and images from the cancelled land books from the Republic of Ireland. So both of these cost me money to order, and I could have, and I have used the cancelled land books in Dublin, and that's great. There's definitely an argument to do that. It's nice to go through the books yourself. It's nice to get exactly the images that you want, but you kind of have to balance the time. There's a trade-off, right? The cost benefit of doing it yourself versus paying somebody something like 30 euros to do it for you, right? And ordering those civil registrations, yeah, you could go and order them yourself in Dublin, but give yourself enough time, you can just order them from afar and have them mailed to you. So consider that when you're doing your research plan, depending how much time you plan to have in Ireland. So here's a sample research plan done in Excel where I started to outline research I could do from home on my ASH family. I created this several years back, but you can see here I've listed the website, the specific database in the website that I intended to search, the search parameters I wanted to use, and the website URL. And I can easily turn this into a research log by making a new column where I then fill in my research results. So going back to our research plan steps, we're finally at the point of making our research plan for what we want to consult once we arrive in Ireland. So how do we figure out what we want to look at when we get there? First, I suggest that you buy this book or you get it out of the library. This is John Grenham's Tracing Your Irish Ancestors. He's got a chapter on each major record set, and he's got a chapter on each county. And in that county section, you're going to find obscure record sets that you didn't know anything about, and it's going to give you call numbers and tell you which library or archive it can be found in. So this is the 5th edition of the book from 2019. And while the older editions will still be helpful, again, I think it is worth the money to get the current edition because things change. And that $50 investment is, versus the thousands of dollars you're spending on your trip, it's worth it to give yourself the best chance of success with the most up-to-date information. On the left there, I've got a screenshot from a page in the book where I have found some of William Teague, his estate records. So that's that landlord for both of the Francis ashes. So I was quite interested in seeing that. And it tells me that it is found at the National Library of Ireland, NLI, and it gives me the name of it, manuscript 872, and I wanted to take a look at that. These are the main repositories that most people visit when they research Ireland. So you're going to want to check out the websites for each one and consider what they have to offer and if that fits into your current research goal. The National Library of Ireland and the National Archives of Ireland, both in Dublin, are the two main repositories that nearly everyone will find themselves using regardless of where in Ireland their ancestor came from. Keep in mind that prior to the partition of the country, what is now Northern Ireland and what is now the Republic of Ireland were all one place. So if your ancestor lived prior to 1922 in what is now Northern Ireland, there still will be records for him in the Republic. There's going to be some for him in Northern Ireland as well. You're going to have to check both. And occasionally there are records at Prony in Belfast that apply to people in the Republic, particularly if you have Presbyterian ancestors. So it's not a bad idea to check both just in case. Here's a photo I took of the outside of the National Library main entrance in Dublin. This is worth considering. What's the difference between a book and a manuscript? What's the difference between a library and an archive? Well, usually a book is published and a manuscript is not published. So libraries usually carry published materials. That is, the same published book can be found in multiple libraries around the world. Archives, on the other hand, usually carry unpublished material, often things that are one of a kind, manuscripts that might not be found anywhere else. But there are always exceptions, and there's definitely exceptions in Ireland. I have found manuscripts such as voters lists that are found, these are unpublished manuscripts. I've found some at the National Library in Dublin, and I have found some at the National Archives as well. Basically, the lesson here is where you think the item is supposed to be kept might not be the case. So you want to keep careful track of what records are available where so that you don't end up at the archives when what you need is actually at the library. You really want to scour the online catalogs to add items to your research plan. This is from the catalog of the National Library. And I've keyword searched using the surname Ash, the landlord Teague, and using my locations of interest. Here I found an entry for workbooks from the Teague estates. And I know that tenants often had to work a certain number of days a year for their landlord, so I was interested in looking at this. And so as I've highlighted in red, this is a manuscript, and it says at the bottom the call number. It says it is viewable in the main reading room, and it notes that it has been microfilmed. So if something has been microfilmed, you usually cannot get access to it in its original form. So this is important for me to note. This is a photo of the inside of the main reading room at the National Library, and it is just gorgeous. This is where you would go to pick up any books or journals that you've ordered to read. The microfilm room, although technically part of the main reading room, is actually in a nearby room, so it's not the exact same spot. So I'm not going to want to try to hold a table in the reading room and a microfilm reader at the same time in a different room. So I'm going to want to make a note of what format all my documents are coming in so I can plan appropriately. Ideally, I want all my books to be viewed at the same time when I've organized myself to be in the main reading room. And I want all my microfilms at the same time when I've organized myself to be at the microfilm reader. Here's another example from the National Library catalog for another manuscript. But you'll notice that you must view this one in the manuscript reading room. This is different from the main reading room, and this caught me off guard the first time. The manuscript reading room is actually in a different building around the corner from the main library building. The manuscript room is up at the top at 2-3 Kildare Street, but the main library is down at the bottom at 7-8 Kildare Street. So this is a separate reading room with its own rules, its own lockers that you have to use. So it's important in my research plan to separate any items that are going to be found in the manuscript room from other items in the main reading room, because I don't want to be running back and forth between the two. Here's another example from my research plan, this time for work within Ireland. So I've grouped the records by repository. So first I've listed the National Library items that are in the main reading room on microfilm. Then I've listed the ones in the manuscript reading room. Then I went through the National Archives online catalog and I grouped 2 items of interest there. And you can see here, well, you can't see it actually. If you were looking at my full plan, you could see that the next section is the Church of Ireland records that I wanted to view at the representative church body library, and so on. Okay, now comes the part of doing the logistical planning to make sure that you know the rules and have everything that you need before you go. Read all of the websites carefully before you even book the dates of your trip, even if you've been to Ireland before. You may find some of the rules change your ability to research when you thought you could. So first check the hours. Maybe you want to visit the library the first day you arrive, only to find out that they're only open a half day on Saturdays. And maybe then you decide you don't want to go to the library at all that day. Maybe you're going to do a tour that day instead. And, there's holidays in Ireland that we don't necessarily celebrate elsewhere, so the whole place could be closed. So definitely take a look into that. Do you need to book an appointment? The valuation office requires one, but they say they might be able to accommodate you if there's space. The registry of deeds requires one. And appointments these days can mostly be made online, so that's nice. Can you bring a phone in to take pictures? The National Archives and the National Library and the valuation office allow them, but you usually have to request permission and fill out a form before you can take any pictures. Do you need a reader's ticket? The library and archive will both, that's a yes. Both will allow you to apply for these online, but you're not going to get them till you arrive in person. And this creates a few more logistics. The library's reader ticket office has different opening hours than the library itself. The library opens at 9:30, the ticket office opens at 10:30. So you're going to lose an hour that day waiting to get your reader's ticket. The National Library and the National Archives both have professional genealogists on hand who you can meet with. And the library one has to be booked by appointment. The archives is a first come, first serve basis. But I do recommend talking to one if you can. They've given me really great advice and it's a free service, so why not? Does the archive close for lunch? Both the National Archives and the representative church body library do close for lunch. So you're going to want to make a plan of where you're going to go. The first time I went to the RCBL library and they closed for lunch, I found myself sort of in the middle of nowhere. kind of a residential area, and the staff person actually drove me and dropped me off to the local pub, and then I just walked back to the archives after the lunch break. So you do want to know when they're going to break so that you don't show up right before they're going to close for an hour or an hour and a half. Do you need ID? For those reader's tickets, yes, you will. So you bring that driver's license or your passport with you. For the archives, you also have to show proof of address that's no more than 6 months old. So you might want to bring a utility bill or something with you. How far in advance do you need to order items? The National Library wants 5 days notice for anything stored off-site. And of course, you don't know where it's stored, so consider you probably need 5 days. But if it's if you don't have 5 days and you're there and you want to look at something, you can always ask the archivist, right? All they can say is no. You never know, they might be able to get it sooner, or maybe it's not stored off-site. I do often email archives before I arrive, in case there's anything I can't figure out from their website or questions that I have, and they're usually really accommodating. Both the National Library and the National Archives have online forms to order things, but there's cutoff times of when you have to order in order to receive by the next delivery time. Ideally, you want items available immediately, ready for you. So you don't want to wait till you arrive to then order stuff and then have to wait, half the day for it to come. Is there a limited number of items you can order? The library, for example, makes 2 deliveries a day to people, and you can order up to 8 items at a time. Putting it all together, so based on everything, you're going to want to make a plan of which repository you're going to on which day. Rearrange your research plan to put all the items together for each repository. Then put them in priority within each repository in case you run out of time, to make sure you see the most important stuff first. Consider making backup plans in case of a surprise. For example, sometimes it's happened to me. I've ordered something and they haven't been able to find it. And I might have, thought I was going to spend an hour or two looking at that thing, and now I can't. Or sometimes you order something and it turns out to be a dud. It's 2 pages long. And again, you thought you were going to spend all afternoon looking at it. So sometimes you might want to order a few backup items just in case the main ones you want to see don't turn out to take that long. Make a note of which items need to be ordered when and add that to your calendar. Because of course, once you start traveling, if you're doing a bunch of traveling before you start researching, it's easy to get distracted and forget to send in your requests on time. So I hope I've demonstrated how valuable planning can be, but obviously it is the rare trip where everything goes to plan. So a level of flexibility is always important. One thing that you find in Ireland might suddenly change the whole trajectory of your research, and it makes suddenly much more sense to do something completely different that was never in your plan before. So allow yourself that flexibility to follow up on the most promising leads in the moment. You might want to consider scheduling in a flex day later in your trip, so that if there's anything you couldn't finish and you want to return to a repository, you've got that extra day to do it. Or happy accidents turn up and now you want to look at something in this other repository. Now you've got a little bit of time in your schedule. So since I first created this presentation, it was during the pandemic sometime, a lot has changed. We spoke about AI a little earlier and how it's helping us search at Family Search. AI also might be helpful in creating your research plan. Now, I am not an AI expert, and there are presentations on this topic by experts that you might want to explore. But I decided to enter in some of my information on my ASH research project to ChatGPT and ask it to make me a research plan. So I've done most of this research already that we discussed today, but I pretended, I hadn't, to see how ChatGPT would compare with what I thought should be done. And this is one of the first of the pages that it came up with. I really do like some things about what it's done. This is very visually appealing. And I could see this being a really good bones to a plan that I would need to add to. So it kind of started by summarizing the information that I gave it, and then kind of gave an overview strategy, which I thought was pretty reasonable. This is the next page here. So my opening prompt to ChatGPT only asked it to give me a plan of what to do in Ireland. So you could spend a lot more time working on the prompts, asking it to give you a plan for what you could do before your visit as well. And you could, kind of go back and forth and discuss with it and have it tweak things that you want it to do. And I didn't spend a whole lot of time with it. But I like how it broke things up of things I should do in Dublin before I get to Kilkenny and things I should do in Kilkenny. So the first two items here are Dublin items. The first at the National Archives and the second thing, the Valuation Office. And while I'm okay with those locations, within what it wants me to search, things do start to fall apart a little bit. The biggest issue here is it's telling me that Farron Temple is in Inistioge Civil Parish, but I know from my townland indexes that it was actually in the Rower Parish. And it's telling me Kilcross is in Drurypoint West Parish, when I actually know it was in Inistioge Parish. So here it's given me some inaccurate information. This is a huge problem because it's going to have me looking in the wrong place. It's going to be creating a brick wall for me where none yet was. So, ChatGPT isn't a search engine, it's a large language model, and you can read all about how it actually comes up with information as a result. But basically, if it doesn't know the answer, it can hallucinate an answer, and it can just also give information that is plain wrong. I'm not really sure where it came up with this. If you even just do a Google search, what parish is Farron Temple in, it'll give you the Rower. But anyway, so this is just a word of warning. Don't let ChatGPT or some other AI just do all your thinking for you. Unfortunately, you still have to do it for yourself. Similarly, ChatGPT wants me to view the council land books at the National Archives, but they are not there. They are at the Valuation Office, that place it wants me to go to second. So I'm not too sure how it made that mistake, but yes, if I show up at the archives asking for them, I will be in the wrong place. Then it's telling me to look at the title allotment books. Well, those are at the archives, but they are digitized. So they are in my plan to look at before I go. I don't want to waste precious time in Ireland looking at things I could look at online. And those estate papers, well, I already know that my particular landlord's papers are at the National Library. They're not in the archives, so that there are some things, though, as I did show in my plan, that are in the archives that I could look at. But again, it's not being very specific. It's not telling me what, because, it's not looking inside databases to add things to my plan. Here's the next page of the plan. It has me going to the RCB Library in Dublin, those Anglican Church archives. But again, it's got the wrong parishes. So again, I'd be ordering up the wrong parish, and that would waste my time. It also doesn't have me going to look at Roots Ireland before I go in that subscription website where I could get possibly indexes to the Anglican records. Maybe I want to check that before I go because it might point to different parish records that I want to view. So I think that was a main important point that it has missed out on here. Then it has me going to Kilkenny to local parishes to just ask them if they have any other old registers. Well, I don't like that. The RCB Library, the Anglican Library, already has a listing on their website of surviving parish records and where they are. So I don't want to go bother a local church to ask what they have when I can already find that online. Looking at headstones, that might be reasonable, but my research question is sort of about which of the two Francis Ashes might be mine, and he died in Canada. So I don't think I'm going to get an answer to my question by looking at headstone transcriptions when the two Francis Ashes live, 13-minute drive from one another, right? And so on. It's got me going eventually to the National Library. It's got me even going to the Public Record Office eventually in Belfast. ChatGPT wraps up with some specific records. I did ask it to tell me specific records that I should examine, so it has tried to do that a little bit here. It's not really specific enough for my purposes. It does have some websites here. I liked that. And I thought the next steps were actually pretty reasonable. So overall, I wouldn't want to go to Ireland with just this plan in hand. But I think it is the bones of a plan that you could edit and build on. I think you just need to add in a lot of details and do all the fact checking. So add in all those call numbers, add in, exactly where your landlord's records are, and so on. So someday maybe AI will be able to do this for us a little bit more accurately, but we're not at that point yet. So use AI as a research assistant, but don't let it call all the shots yet. So I hope today has been helpful, and I hope you can see yourself starting to work on a research plan today for your next Irish research trip. You can find me at my website, cmgenealogy.com. You can find me at Blue Sky. My email is up there, and I am happy to take questions.
Well, thank you so much. We're getting some great comments in the chat. That was wonderful information. And yes, keep your contact slide up just for a few more minutes, just to make sure everybody gets down that information. And we will get through some of these questions. Oh, somebody actually wants to coordinate with you to discuss offline and developing a plan. So they need to contact you through one of these ways, correct?
Exactly.
Perfect. All right. So there's your way to contact. Yes, there is a handout. One of my colleagues already put it in the chat. Very fast. Thank you. Okay. Are there ships arrivals online for ships from Ireland to Montreal during the early 1840s?
Highly unlikely. In, Unfortunately, Canadian ships were not required to give passenger lists before 1865. So unless your person went down to the US first and then came up to Canada, you're highly unlikely to get a passenger list before 1865. There are some kind of hit and miss. Like if you go to the Library and Archives Canada website, you can get a lot of the listings that are there. So it's worth checking in case you are one of the lucky ones. I often say, to clients not to become obsessed with finding a passenger list because it doesn't work out for many of us. And even if we find the right name, John Murphy, we don't know it's our John Murphy unless he came with his whole family. And a lot of people create a brick wall for themselves then by assuming this is their John Murphy, assuming he got there in 18 whatever, and he actually got there 10 years later, and so on. So yeah, unfortunately, you probably are out of luck, but I would try Library and Archives Canada.
Someone is calling out the book, The Townland Atlas of Ulster.
Mhm.
I'm assuming you're familiar with that. They're saying
Yeah,
that it's a great resource.
I knew it.
I'm guessing you have it behind you?
It is. Look at how big it is, and it is so beautiful. Like I just have
It
to.
is beautiful. Somebody donated a copy to us. It was
Yeah,
lovely.
look at those maps, color maps. Yeah, it is lovely. I still use
Beautiful.
the new genealogical atlas of Ireland a lot, and I've written all over it. But this Townland one is truly lovely.
Oh, yes. Um, Someone's asking, how did you decide where to visit in specific countries?
Usually just order of priorities. So, if your research question is about land, you might want to start at the valuation office if you already know more or less where your person lived. If it's in the Republic of Ireland, you can go to the valuation office in Dublin. That you have to pay a fee, I believe, to visit, but you get to sit there and flip through the books by hand, although they are starting to digitize them, although they don't it's not online. You can see the digital copies, but you have to see them there, unfortunately. But you can flip through and you can track when the changeover in the land happens. So it's really cool in that you can see when it changes from father to son or when the family leaves, and occasionally you'll get different inks that are used. You'll be able to figure out what year it happened in. So if you have a land question, something like the valuation office maybe moves to the top. But if you particularly want to dive into landlord records, because again where it is, then you're going to be at either the National Library or the National Archives. If you have a really specific area, you're in County Kilkenny and you have that place name, you can go and see what library or archives might be local there, and they might have, a lot more things for you. Just a lot of people were not quite at that level usually. A lot of people are stuck at the county level, if that. And honestly, most of the work I do with Irish genealogy is for people who are trapped in Canada still that can't get to that place in Ireland, so they can't even get on the trip.
share. Thank you.
Of
Someone
course.
wants to know, what years did you go to Ireland?
I went I went twice in the last 2 years, but that was purely social. And, I was really lucky to go every year for about 4 or 5 years, kind of between 2012 and 2019. My husband was for work going there every year, and so I was tagging along, and then um, he did a sabbatical there as well, so we lived there for 3 months. I think that was 2012 before we started doing all the other visits. And so, yeah, I was able to live there for 3 months and then kind of research both in different places. And we lived in Dublin, so I did most of my research there. So, yeah, I haven't researched boots on the ground in a few years now. So, um, I think most of this is still up to date, but again, always check the websites. I did before we did the presentation because some things have gone more online since I was there.
That's really cool. How lucky.
It was awesome.
Are local churches amenable to helping the casual visitors look for their ancestors?
I would make an appointment. I did, I was in County Sligo looking at church registers for one of my ancestors at the Anglican church. And I had to stand up and while a volunteer stared at me and watched me turn the pages, and I couldn't take pictures. So obviously that's not really conducive to like recording everybody of a certain surname's records that are there, right? So they were amenable, but I certainly felt like, oh my gosh, I got to get out of here, this poor person is standing here and not even sitting. And so I think you can ask um if it's digitized already, like your Catholic records, obviously they're going to tell you to go use the microfilm online instead. So I think it will depend. And a lot of them, it is really nice using the Anglican ones at the Representative Church Body Library because they're all just there and you can use the original records and you're not disturbing anybody at a particular parish, and you could bring in your laptop and you can record everything. Sadly, I couldn't take pictures, but you can type it all up. So that's a lot better. So I would definitely look and see if it's been digitized. Like Prony for Northern Ireland has a lot of microfilms of their different uh, Presbyterian records and so on. And so that's the place to go for that, or the Presbyterian Historical Society in the North as well will have records maybe for the Republic. So that might be a better option as opposed to trying to go to the specific parishes, especially if you're not exactly sure which parish your people might have been at.
Perfect. Thank you. Someone's asking, is there equivalent repository as the RCB for the Catholic records?
I believe there is. I've never had to use it because I'm always in a period of time that's historical enough that I'm using the ones that were microfilmed and are now digitized. But I believe there is an archive. Catholics can be a little bit difficult to allow you to access their records a lot of times, and sometimes it's on a parish by parish decision basis, or sometimes it's on a archdiocese or diocese decision basis. So I'm not exactly sure what your access level will be like, but I know I have found myself on a website for like a maybe archdiocese archive or something like that in maybe the Dublin area. So I think they exist, but I have not used them, so I'm not really 100% sure.
We're going to do a couple more questions and then be done. The first one is, did you contact a local history center to find out what resources might be available for in-person research before arriving?
Like a local history center for, yeah, the Ireland has like a bunch of county history societies. I'm trying to remember their exact name. They are socially associated with Roots Ireland, that subscription website that I told you about. So I have visited the one in Sligo, and you can send them emails to these different centers before you go that Roche house that was actually in the research plan AI made for me is where one of those centers is located. Um, for me, when I went to the one in Sligo, I have to say, they sort of presented me with a printed out um, church transcription of someone who might be my ancestor. And maybe most tourists would be happy enough to leave with that and say, I found it. But there wasn't really like the depth of work behind it that I would prefer to do for myself. Um, but I do think if you look on the Roots Ireland website, you can search before subscribing to see exactly what information they have um, digitized, at least per county. And that will give you a big sense of like what church records they have covered and so on. And that's where you can also find the contact information for each of the centers. And you can send them an email. Like I noticed the one at Rosh House in Kilkenny was charging money quite a bit for the research, but you could contact them and have them do a bunch of work for you before you go. And I'm sure it would be more exacting than what I got when I when I visited. Here you go, there they are.
Wonderful. Thank you. All right, this is going to be our last question. Folks, if we didn't get to your question today, please feel free to reach out. You have contact information for Colleen. You can contact us at genealogy@acpl.info, and we will do our best to help you as well. So last question, where would most Irish sail from if they lived in Belfast early 1900s?
Probably Belfast or a lot of people from Liverpool. Like I've seen a lot of people from Sligo, like just anywhere there's a port, people were leaving. So I couldn't say for certain, and it depends where they were going, but um, you got to look at all of them.
Great answer. Well, thank you so much. That was a wonderful presentation, and we got through most of the questions, not all, sorry, folks. But it is time, and thank you. Thank you, Colleen, for a wonderful presentation. Thank you, everyone, for joining us, and we hope to see you on Thursday for our next presentation. Have a great rest of your day, everyone. Bye.
Thank you.